Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. We continue. We're almost there. We're in the very bottom. There's a Mishnah on the very bottom of Daf Lamed Bet Amud Bet, 32b. And if you're looking in the English article, it's 32b 32b. There's a Mishnah there. We did this at the end of last week's shiur. We'll do it again, and we will elaborate a little bit more on this Mishnah. Essentially, what we're talking about now in our Mishnah, hey, how are you? What we're talking about now in our Mishnah is things that you're not allowed to do in order to get access to a shofar. So let's say, for example, you need to get access to a shofar on Yom Tov, but in order to do that, you need to break some laws. Here's a list of laws you're not allowed to break, right? So shofar, you have to blow it on Rosh Hashana, right? We're not talking about Shabbat, we're talking about Rosh Hashana, but Yom Tov has laws. There are certain laws you're not allowed to break. So there we go. Let's begin. 32b 4, if you're looking in the art scroll or looking in the screen. I'm going to share a screen and let's go. Matnitin, our shofar shel Rosh Hashana, the shofar of the Rosh Hashana, to get access to it, ein ma'avirin alav et techum. We are not allowed to leave the techum. The techum, hey, the techum is what? Can anyone remind you what a techum is? City limits on. Exactly, city borders, city limits, that you're not allowed to leave 2,000 amot outside of the city borders. This, according to most opinions, is a rabbinic prohibition. That rabbinically you have to stay put. And you said Shabbat, yes, and also Yom Tov. In this example of Rosh Hashana, you have to stay put. It's not a day of going and traveling, right? So Shabbat, Yom Tov. Correct. Completely different topic of carrying, right? So carrying, you're not allowed to carry even a few steps in a public domain. A couple feet you're not allowed to carry. And it could be in your own yard. You're not allowed to, for argument's sake. It's not about leaving the city techum. On the flip side, if you don't have anything on you and you're not carrying anything, you're allowed to walk outside because you're not carrying anything until you get to the city limit, the techum, and you're not allowed to pass it. Techum is completely unrelated to hotza'ah or carrying. Very good. An amma is approximately, let's call it about 1.5 feet. It's called a cubit. Amma is from your elbow to your index, the tip of your index finger. It's about, what we say is, if you want to know, there's different opinions, without getting too much into it. An amma is 6 tefachim. Tefach is a hand's breadth. So an amma is 6 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, basically is what it comes out to. And each tefach, there's basically ranges of opinions. The Rav Chaim says it's 8 centimeters, and the Chazon Ish is 9.6 centimeters, and you have others in the middle. So it's somewhere between 8 and 9.6 is each tefach, times 6 is how much an amma is, right? So 2,000 amot outside of the city border, you're not allowed to walk. But what happens on Shabbat and on Yom Tov? Now, what happens on Yom Tov, Rosh Hashana? You don't have a shofar. In order to get a shofar, you have to walk to who knows where, I don't know, per Washington. And in order to get there, you have to leave the city limits, for argument's sake. Are you allowed to? Our Mishnah is telling you no, right? Shofar shel Rosh Hashana, ein ma'avirin alav et techum. You're not allowed to break this rabbinic prohibition to go get a shofar. Even though shofar is from the Torah, and the techum is only from the rabbis, you're not allowed to. You're also not allowed to clear away rubble from a building. Let's say, for example, let's say there's a dilapidated building, the building collapses. And you know, hey, my shofar is in there. Now, there's a law that rubble and rocks and like a construction site, if you will, or not really a construction site, this is more of a demolition site, is mukseh. Mukseh is rabbinic in nature. The rabbis came and said if something has no purpose, like rocks and rubble, you're not allowed to handle it on Shabbat. You're not allowed to move it on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So if under the rubble there is a shofar, in order to get the shofar, it's Rosh Hashana, you want to blow the shofar, but you have to break mukseh. You have to break the laws of mukseh in order to get to it. You're not allowed to. Again, this is another rabbinic mitzvah that you're not allowed to break. Leaving the tchum on Yom Tov is rabbinic. You're not allowed to do it, even if it means you're going to miss blowing the shofar. Moving rubble on Yom Tov is rabbinic. And you're not allowed to do it, even if it means you're going to miss blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashana. Next, lo olin ba'ilan. You may not climb a tree. Let's say, for example, your neighborhood raccoon stole your shofar, and just climbed up and left it on top of the tree. Are you allowed to bring it down on Shabbat? So there is a rabbinic decree brought down in Masechet Beitzah that you are not allowed to climb a tree on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to climb a tree on Shabbat. But here we're talking about Yom Tov. You're not allowed to climb. Why? Gezerah. Shema Yitlosh. It's a gezerah. It's a enactment that they said that don't climb a tree, because as you climb a tree, what might happen is you might break off branches, and that is from the Torah. Breaking off something that's attached to the ground on Chag or Yom Shabbat is against the Torah. That is one. It's kotzer. It's harvesting, right? That's against the Torah. That's one of the 39 melakhot. So this is the next thing you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to do the rabbinic. You're not allowed to go against the rabbinic decree of climbing a tree on Shabbat, because even though it's rabbinic, you're not allowed to break a rabbinic law in order to get the shofar on Shabbat. Okay? Similarly, we're not allowed to ride on an animal on Yom Tov in order to get the shofar. Let's say to get the shofar, you have to go in a place that, let's say it's within the city limits, it's within the Tchum, but you can't go by foot for whatever reason. It's very far, it's very steep, you need to get on top of a horse, whatever it is. You're not allowed to ride an animal in order to get your shofar. What if it means you're going to miss shofar? Doesn't matter. You're not allowed to ride. This is rabbinic also. Rabbinically, why are you not allowed to ride an animal on Shabbat or Yom Tov? The same Mishnah tells us. Same thing. You might come to break off a branch from a tree. Why? It seems like this is what would happen. You're riding a horse. The horse starts doing something it's not supposed to do. You don't have a whip or something to speak to it. So you go to the nearest tree, grab a branch and say, "Hiya," or whatever you say to horses. And then you give it a hit and it understands what you have to do. So it seems like this was a common enough thing, common enough practice that you get on top of your donkey, the next tree you grab, you break a thing and start telling it what to do. So because of that, our sages came and said, you're not allowed to ride an animal on Shabbat and Yom Tov, lest you come to break a branch off a tree, which is from the Torah. Okay? So we're going to go through the list and then we'll come back and go through it. V'lo shatin al penei mayim. And we don't go on the water. This is like swimming in the water. This is talking about a public water. There was a decree made by the rabbis not to go swimming in a river, for example. Why? Again, similar concept, that lest someone come to build something to create a life raft or to create a lifesaver or what is it called? Life vest or a floaty. So it seems like I'm going and swimming in the river, and as I'm going and swimming in the river, you're like, hey, you weren't able to, they didn't have like the same flotation devices that we had. So if you wanted to go swimming and you were safe, they weren't going to the local Marriott pool. What would they do? They go to a river. You go to the river, all of a sudden you get a fast current, something. You need to have something secure to help you to float. They would build a raft. I'm not talking about this is a raft that like Tom Hanks made in Castaway. You make something in order to help you float. You take two logs, tie it together, and that's enough. You break a branch to use it as a... You could break branches, and now you're taking it a step further. Even if it sounds like not necessarily with you don't even have to go there. Just the concept that you're building something that's against the Torah. Building, it's bonnet. So since someone might come to build, they told you not to swim. Okay, I want to speak about the swimming in a pool a little bit later, but let's keep the flow going, and we'll come back to it if we can.
Is this only swimming or just get a shofar, or just swimming period? Talking about getting a shofar, talking about swimming in general.
No. The decree has nothing to do with the shofar.
But this is talking about shofar, right?
Correct. You're not allowed to swim.
Get a shofar.
Even if you're going to get a shofar, which is a mitzvah. You're not allowed to swim in an open body of water. Correct. Why?
It might lead you to have to build.
Because you might come, exactly. It's a gezerah. They told you not to do it because you might come to build a raft. Now, what if it means that's the only way I can get my shofar? I have to get across the Harlem River in order to get to the shofar. You can't. So this list is telling you how there are rabbinic laws, and the rabbinic laws are intact. You're not allowed to break them, even if you want to get shofar. Are you allowed to break any mitzvot in order to get a shofar? The answer is no. What about if it's only rabbinic? The answer is no. Very good, Rama. You got the point of the Mishnah. So we're just giving examples.
Going to the beach is absolutely prohibited on Shabbat.
Okay, so like I said, I want to speak about swimming afterwards, but I want to keep the flow of our Gemara. But yeah, very good. Correct. Going to swimming in an open body of water, there's a gezerah against it. There's a gezerah against it. Okay, here we go. On Shabbat. Okay. You're also not, here's something specific about the shofar. You're not allowed to cut the shofar. Now, when you say cut the shofar, there's two ways of understanding that. One of them means to cut it off the animal's head. The other one is saying to hollow it out. You saw the videos, basically the way the process of a shofar works is that you have the shofar, you have to soften it up, the whole thing comes off the bone, or you're drilling through the bone, you're drilling through what was called the zachrut, then you have to cut the tip off, you have to drill a hole in. This is whole process. You're not allowed to do that. So let's say someone brings you an unprocessed, unfinished ram's horn and says, here it is. And you have a knife, you have a saw there, and you know how to make it. Are you allowed to do it on Rosh Hashana? No, you're not allowed to. This is a decree of what's called tikkun kli. You are finalizing. So makev patish, there is an object that's unusable and you're making it usable. That is something that you're not allowed to do on Shabbat. You're creating something. You're creating a vessel, right? So now here it says, if you have the shofar, you're not allowed to hollow it out, cut it up, clean it up, get it ready to go, carve it out. And it doesn't matter whether the tool that you're using is an official tool, which would make it against the Torah, for example, like a drill or some sort of a tool to actually cut it, like a knife or a saw rather, or or something that is only rabbinically. For example, like I said last time, if I go cut the shofar with my key and I'm able to do it by putting in the manpower, that's not against the Torah because you're not using a specialized vessel for it. It's not against the Torah, but it's against the rabbis. And what we're saying is, even though it's only against the rabbis, you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to finalize the shofar on Yom Tov. But if you want to finalize the shofar, not by cleaning it out, but by just pouring in some water or pouring in some wine or vinegar or something to wash it out, that's okay. Right? Because you could still get a sound out of the shofar. You're not finalizing the process. It's final. You're allowed to do this final wash. That's not considered finalizing, taking something that's unusable and making it usable. It's usable. Just you're making it a little bit better. You're enhancing the sound. That's okay.
Do we do that? Do we put water in?
I don't know. We have to ask a shofar player. I don't think they do that. No. I think at the very beginning of the season, yes, I have heard of people, and sometimes you smell the shofar, it has a smell of vinegar. I have heard of people washing out the shofar with vinegar to help make it smooth. However, what I've learned is that you actually should not do that right before Rosh Hashana or on Rosh Hashana because you really need it to dry. Blowing the shofar when it's wet, from what I've heard, is actually a problem. Now, I don't really know. Maybe we could get maybe now we could bring someone who knows how to blow the shofar for these last couple of classes and show us and teach us. But yeah, they do that. They will rinse it out. Fine. Okay, so to recap, can someone in one word, in one line, tell me what our Mishnah is teaching us so far?
Not transgress any of the melakhot, Shabbat, or Yom Tov for the benefit of doing the mitzvah of blowing the shofar.
Very good. You cannot transgress any melacha of Shabbat and Yom Tov in order to do the mitzvah of shofar. Yeah, exactly. Even if it's only rabbinic, even if from the Torah it's allowed, you're still not allowed to do it. This is crazy because the rabbis made an enactment, and because you're listening to the rabbi's enactment, you're not doing a mitzvah from the Torah. You see that? There's a shofar there. Across the river, there's a shofar. Hashem says on Rosh Hashana, blow the shofar. So you say, Hashem says I have to do it. Torah says I have to do it. Let me go do it. No. Rabbi says don't go in the water. Okay, but the Torah says I have to blow the shofar. He says, I don't care. Get your shofar from somewhere else. I can't. Okay, sorry.
That person's fault for not.
The rabbis are telling you, don't do the mitzvah. It's okay.
Or prepare before.
Prepare before. Again, what about in my example that the raccoon came and stole it from you? And are you supposed to have a conversation with the raccoon before? Sometimes you can't prepare before. But even in that situation, Rama, even if you did all the preparations before, all of a sudden, boom, it fell in the water. Something happened, all of a sudden your kid came and threw your shofar into your backyard, into the water.
So how can you explain that a rabbinic decree is more important than And
So
right,
the answer is that the rabbis have the authority to tell you to break a Torah b'shev ta'aseh, meaning by being passive. The rabbis can tell you not to do a mitzvah of the Torah. They can't tell you to transgress. They can't. The rabbis can't come and say, "Kum v'aseh, go eat pork today," because we have a decree that you have to eat pork. They don't do that, but they can make a decree that they tell you don't do anything. And since you're not doing anything, you're going to end up not doing mitzvah said. That's the authority that the rabbis have. Okay, good. Last, yes, question.
Sorry, Rabbi. Yeah. You mentioned in summary that we cannot transgress any of the melakhot in order to blow the shofar. But why would the Mishnah mention these specific melakhot? Like, why not say in summary, don't transgress any melakhot, rabbinic or Torah?
Okay, good question. Let's wait until we get to the Gemara where we start breaking down like the examples into two categories. And we're not going to answer your question, but we are going to look at some of the differences of the examples and why we're teaching both examples. Okay, so let's wait until we get to the Gemara. Very good question. Yeah, so your question of Gezirah D'Rabbah, so your question is why don't we repeat that? The Gezirah D'Rabbah is talking about on Rosh Hashana shechal liot b'Shabbat, not to blow the shofar at all. Okay? Here we're talking about not on Shabbat. We're talking about a Rosh Hashana that your people are doing it. Everyone is doing it. You, in your circumstance, the only way to get to it is by doing something wrong. And even in that case, you're not supposed to do it. You're absolutely correct that the Gezirah D'Rabbah is falling under the same mechanism where the rabbis are telling you not to do a mitzvah from the Torah because they don't want you to come to carry. So they are making a decree and they're telling you not to do a mitzvah. So it's the same power, authority that the rabbis have. But the difference here is that we're talking about a regular Rosh Hashana. You have thousands of people going to the Kanisa to hear the shofar and you can't. Why? Because you're stuck behind the river or you're outside the Tchum. You just happen to be in the cheaper hotel was outside the Tchum and you went there and you're stuck and no shofar for you. Okay, let's keep going. Last line of our Mishnah, this is called the Igal scenario, the Igal case study. You guys know what happened with Igal. Igal, can you tell us the story of what happened with you?
Shabbat a few months ago, kids had a shofar at home. They brought it to me and said, "Can you, Daddy, show us how you blow the shofar?" And I wasn't sure if it violated Gezerah.
Yeah.
So I said, "I'll blow it anyway, no problem."
How old are your kids that asked you this?
4.
Okay. 4. Okay, so you hear the situation. This is exactly what our Mishnah is talking about. 4-year-old comes to you, comes to Igal. His 4-year-old comes on a regular Shabbat. It wasn't Rosh Hashana. It was a regular Shabbat. He has a shofar. They grab it. They say, "Daddy, please blow me the shofar." Show him, blow the shofar. It's Shabbat. Now, Rosh Hashana falls on Shabbat. We don't blow shofar. We don't do it. But now, what if it's not Rosh Hashana? Are you allowed to? So that's, according to some, that's what this line of the Mishnah is talking about. Let's hear what it says. Ein me'akvin et hatinokot militkoa. You don't prevent the children from sounding the shofar. Meaning, this isn't exactly Igal's case. The case of our Mishnah is saying, let's say the kid picks it up and starts blowing it. You don't have to stop them. Ein me'akvin et hatinokot militkoa. Don't prevent them from doing it. And more than that, you're allowed to get involved even to teach them how to do it. Okay? So you're allowed to do something positive. And last line of the Mishnah, Mit'asek lo yatsa, someone that blows the shofar unaware or absent-mindedly did not fulfill an obligation. We spoke about this at length beforehand. We did a whole shiur on the topic, where if you're blowing the shofar absent-mindedly, let's say the guy is just like he's whistling, and as he's whistling, he grabs this and he starts making a sound, and it happens to be he does it perfectly. He does it perfectly. And then all of a sudden someone says, you just blew the shofar perfectly. You actually just nailed it. I don't know where you got it from. He's like, oh, I heard this on the radio one time. I was just making this. I had no idea what he was doing. Someone blows the shofar absent-mindedly. That's called mit'asek. He did not fulfill his obligation. Lo yatsa. And if you heard him You heard that person blowing the shofar. You heard someone who was only mit'asek, who was blowing the shofar absentmindedly. That's called mit'asek. You heard someone who was mit'asek blowing the shofar. Lo yatsa, you also didn't fulfill the obligation. He doesn't fulfill it, and people who heard him didn't fulfill his obligation. Okay? Yes.
Sorry, little sidetrack. Didn't we learn that from Sfot?
Yeah.
In Shifot Kavanah?
So very good. We're going to get into this. The Gemara is going to expand. You can see our Mishnah has 3 separate sections. That's exactly the topic there. The first section of our Mishnah, David Ilmani, this is for the notes. The first section of our Mishnah talks about rabbinic laws that you're not allowed to transgress in order to get the shofar, meaning you'll even miss the mitzvah of shofar, but you're not allowed to break the rabbinic laws. That's the first section. The second section is the children one, saying that you don't have to hold them back, you don't have to stop kids from blowing the shofar on Shabbat, and you could even get yourself involved with it. And then the third one is saying, and if someone is just fiddling around with the shofar, just making sound for whatever it is, you didn't fulfill his obligation, and if you heard that person, you didn't fulfill your obligation either. Those are 3 separate sections. The Gemara is going to break down and talk about each one separately. Okay? Gemara, at the very bottom, let's go. My ta'ama. What's the reason? Why is it that I shouldn't break the mitzvah of Yom Tov in order to do the mitzvah of shofar? At the end of the day, shofar is a mitzvah from the Torah. So why is it that you tell me don't transgress sins of Yom Tov? Why not? Let me do it. As Hashem says, blow the shofar. Shofar asehu. Shofar is a mitzvah aseh. What does a mitzvah aseh mean? It's a positive mitzvah that says Yom Tiraya Lachem. It should be a time of blowing the shofar. It's a positive mitzvah. Yom Tov aseh velo ta'aseh. Yom Tov is both a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah. What is the positive and the negative mitzvah? The positive is to call it a Mikraya Kodesh. It's from this week's parasha. It's to call it a holy day, a rest from doing work. That's a mitzvah aseh. And the lo ta'aseh is lo ta'aseh kol melakhet avodah lo ta'asu. You can't do work. So the observing the laws of Yom Tov is really 2 mitzvot. It's a positive mitzvah and it's a negative mitzvah. Shofar is how many mitzvot? Only 1. It's a positive mitzvah. So one more time. Shofar asehu. Yom Tov aseh velo ta'aseh. Ve'en aseh, and 1 single positive mitzvah will not doche et lo ta'aseh v'aseh. Will not come and push away a lo ta'aseh and aseh combined. When you have a mitzvah of Yom Tov, it's an aseh and a lo ta'aseh. Shofar is only an aseh. So which one takes precedence? Yom Tov. Yes.
Does that mean anything? Because
So you're saying, like, what if it was a lo ta'aseh versus an aseh? What would you do then?
don't forget to blow shofar.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You're asking excellent questions. Yeah. So let me just tell you like this. This topic is not something we're going to go into. I'm not going to answer your question, but I'll just tell you how these questions come up a lot in the Gemara. I'll give you 2 examples. Famous example: Shabbat, Brit Milah. You're not allowed to cut. You're not allowed to cause bleeding. That's one of the things that you're not allowed to do. It's a melakha. But you also have to do a mitzvah aseh of Brit Milah. Brit Milah is an aseh. Shabbat is an aseh and a lo ta'aseh. So there you have an aseh and a lo ta'aseh and aseh. But you do say the aseh takes over. So that goes in direct contrast with this. Because shofar is an aseh, Brit Milah is an aseh. Shabbat is aseh and lo ta'aseh. Yom Tov is aseh and lo ta'aseh. Shofar, you say, no. Aseh will not be doche, lo ta'aseh and aseh. But Brit Milah you will. Why? Well, the Brit Milah you have another thing. Because it says, there's an extra word. It says, Bayom HaShemini, on the 8th day, specifically on the 8th day, the Gemara says, Afilu b'Shabbat. There's extra psukim that come, tip the scales in that way. So if you had some other verses or something to tip the scale of shofar, then it would work, but we don't have that. I'll give you another example, and then we're going to move on. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that says, Hishamer minega atzara'at. The word Hishamer is it's a mitzvah. Is it a positive or is it a negative? Hishamer means to be careful. Be careful with. Is that an aseh or lo ta'aseh? Very good. Even though it doesn't use the word lo, it is a lo ta'aseh. How did you know? 50% careful. Yeah, be careful. So this is one of the things we learn when it says Hishamer, be careful. that's actually a lo ta'aseh. Like, don't do this. It's implicitly you're saying, be careful, don't do this. So the Torah says not to cut off nega tzara'at. This is one of the mitzvot from the Torah, one of the 613. Tzara'at. What is tzara'at?
Leprosy.
Yeah, not leprosy. It's a skin discoloration. When that is defined as tzara'at, don't start picking and cut that off. You're not allowed to cut that off. This is what the mitzvah of the Torah is. If it's there, it's there. You got to leave it. Now, I don't know who would start cutting off their skin, but maybe you would go to a plastic surgeon. You would say maybe use like a very incision cut, like maybe it's very superficial. You could cut it. No, you're not allowed to cut it. Now, ready for the question? That's an lo ta'aseh. How can you construct that to go against an aseh? When is a time that you need to cut off a part of your skin? Brit milah. Very good. Let's say a baby is born, and on the 8th day, all of a sudden there's sarat right in the place of the orla, right on the foreskin. There's sarat. You're not allowed to cut it because it says hishameh, but you have to do brit milah because it says you should cut it. Imol. So which one is it? This is a case where you have an aseh against a lo ta'aseh.
Brit milah is more important.
Brit milah wins. So that's a situation where you have aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh. So back to your question, this is like a whole semester worth of studies of what do you do when mitzvot are going against each other. There's all sorts of prioritizations and different things. It's like, you can't always, there's rules. Here is one of the rules, but even this rule, like I gave you with Brit Milah, is not always kept. And then if things are different, and then sometimes you have double, and so it gets it's a lot of fun.
Absolute rule. Each case is different.
There are rules, but there is no single rule. There are multiple. Right. Exactly. So we have different situations, different mitzvot have different priorities. Exactly. Okay? Very good. Next line. Lo olin ba'ilan, velo rochlin al gabe behema. The Gemara gave us examples. Now, the examples of rabbinic, going back to what Mr. David Dalmani was asking, the Gemara gives different examples of different types of sins, that rabbinic ones that we shouldn't do on Yom Tov, even if that's how you're going to get your shofar. So what did it say? You can't leave the tchum. Is that rabbinic or from the Torah? It's rabbinic. Everything here that we're going to list is rabbinic. Then mukseh, the rubble, moving rubble. Are you not allowed to move mukseh in order to get your shofar? Is that rabbinic? Yes. But there's something unique about these rabbinics. They're not tied to a Torah law. It's just a rabbinic enactment. The rabbis came and said, we want you to rest. Stay put. Don't leave the tchum. The rabbi said, we want you to not to focus on things that are useless. Don't play with rocks on Yom Tov. It's not tied to a Torah law. But when I tell you not to climb a tree, why did the rabbis say that? Because what happens if you climb a tree? You're going to break the branch, which is from the Torah. Or don't ride an animal. Why did the rabbi say don't ride an animal? Because you might break the branch, which is the Torah law. So there are rabbinic laws that are just rabbinic enactments, and then there are rabbinic laws that are coming to protect the Torah. So the Gemara says, once you give me examples of rabbinic laws that are rabbinic enactments, then of course the rabbinic ones that are coming to protect the Torah, I shouldn't do. Even the ones that the rabbis, quote unquote, made up, you shouldn't do. And of course don't do the ones that the rabbis are connecting to the Torah. So let's read that. Hashta de Rabbanan amart lo. Now the rabbinic ones, like leaving the tichum and clearing out the pile of rubble, which are entirely rabbinic, you said I shouldn't do. Deoraita mebaya. Do you need to now include mitzvot that are somehow attached to a Torah law? The Gemara answers, Zo ve'en sarich zo lomar katani. Ve'en sarich lomar zo katani. The Mishnah gives a very an answer that basically is telling you, bro, chill. Okay, this is what the Gemara is saying. You're like, how come you gave this example? How come you give that example? Once you give me this example, I know that example. The Gemara says, bro, chill. I'm just giving you examples. Exactly. Stop thinking for a second. I'm just giving you some examples. I'm using this as an opportunity to teach you certain laws. What does that mean? Zo ve'en tzarich lomar zo ketani. Our Mishnah is telling you this, and I don't even need to tell you this. There's like a phrase in English. What is it? No, not keep it simple. Sorry.
Throwing everything in the kitchen sink?
No. Sorry, it's just like an intro to something you would say. Needless to say. Okay, the phrase "needless to say" is ridiculous. Needless to say, and then you say it. But if you don't need to say it, so then why do you say it?
It goes without saying.
It goes without saying that you should do this. Okay, so if it goes without saying, so then you're actually saying it, right? So this is exactly the same thing. Our Mishnah is zo ben tzarich lomar zo. It's needless to say, but sometimes you do it. This Mishnah is basically saying, for a second here, we just wanted to start listing different examples. That's all it is. We didn't need to give all of them. You're right. Back to David's question. We could have just given a rule. You're right. But bro, chill. Now, this is my way of explaining it. Zo ve'en tzarich lomar zo katani. Our Mishnah is teaching you this. How does the art school say it? This, and it is unnecessary to say that. It begins with the more novel case before moving on to the more straightforward case. So it's saying, I gave you one case, and then once I tell you that, I really didn't need to keep going. I could have made this in fewer words, but I wanted to teach you this way. Okay? Another thing. Ve'en chotchin oto. Don't cut the shofar. We're now turning to Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph, 33a, 1. En chotchin oto. Don't cut the shofar. Ben bedavar shu mishum shvut. Whether it's something that would only be a rabbinic problem, like I said, like a key or a plastic spoon, something that's like not really meant for this. Or even if it's something that would be a lo ta'aseh, a bona fide form of cutting that would be against the Torah. So the Gemara is actually going to give its examples. Mishum shvut. What is an example of a way of cutting a shofar that is only rabbinically prohibited because it's not the professional way of doing it? Magala. Magala is a sickle. Anyone know what a sickle is? For harvesting wheat. It's like a semicircle, or maybe it's even more than that. It's a knife. Now, what do? You go to the grass or to the wheat like this, and it's like in a circular shape. So imagine my hand was the knife, and I went like this and cut it. What do you use that for? For harvesting wheat. You don't use that for cutting a shofar. You're cutting a shofar, you need a saw. Okay, but let's say I used the wrong tool, which would only be prohibited rabbinically, that would be a problem. With lo ta'aseh, what is a lo ta'aseh? Sakina, it's a saw, it's a knife, it's something that you would use to cut the shofar. So we're going to ask the same question. Hold on a second. If I'm not allowed to cut the shofar with the unusual way, of course I can't do it with the usual way of a knife. So the Gemara is going to ask the same question. Hashta mishum shvut amat lo. First, you told me that you can't cut the shofar with in an unnatural way, in an irregular way, with a sickle. Lo ta'aseh mibaya. You need to also tell me that I can't cut it with a saw? Of course I can't. If I can't do it in an unusual way, of course I can't do it in the proper way. So, zo ve'en tzarich lomar zo katani. Again, I'm just giving you examples in a very long-winded way by saying, you're right. If I would have taught you the first case of a sickle, you would have known that you can't cut it with a sickle. You can't cut it with a saw either. But I wanted to say, zo ve'en tzarich, I taught you something that logically you could have figured out. Okay? Next case. Rama, what did we say we put in the shofar? Do you remember?
Water or wine or vinegar.
Our Mishnah says water or wine. I added vinegar because I know people use vinegar, and vinegar is similar to wine, right? But let's see what the Gemara wants to pick out that says, there's something you omitted from this list. What did we omit from this list? I know that you're thinking about using this. Olive oil. So the Gemara has another thing. The Gemara says urine. Which it's like, wait, sorry, who was thinking that? But the Gemara is going to say, you conveniently left it out. It must mean you can't use urine. Okay, so let's read it. Matnitin mani. So, right? Who is the author? Sorry, I skipped the line. If you want to put water or wine in it, you're allowed to. Maim or yain in. Water or wine, you're allowed to. But what does that imply? Me raglaim lo. You're not allowed to put urine in there. Matnitin mani. Sorry?
Is it raglaim in your legs?
Yes. Raglaim is legs. Me raglaim is water that comes from between your legs. It's
use the word raglaim
yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah, hello, me raglaim yefila ela shen machzim me raglaim yefila kavod.
Why is it talking about urine in the Torah?
Yeah, no, it's like a Torah class, but yeah, over there it's talking about how you would technically be allowed to use urine to do something, but you're not going to do it because it's not honorable. You have to
use example of urine in ways where it's like.
You know why? Because it's very available and it's free and it's otherwise useless. So let's say, I don't know, I've never tried cleaning out a shofar. But let's say I told you that the chemical makeup of urine is good for cleaning out a shofar. Let's say it has acid and you need acid. Okay? Am I allowed to use urine or not? Let's say I told you it works. Isn't there like this like a legend? I don't know if it's real or not, that if you get bit by a jellyfish, you have to urinate on it and then it does that. I don't know if that works or not. But okay, so let's stipulate for a second that urine has a good chemical makeup to clean out and polish a shofar. Okay, now you come and you ask a question. Very good. So our Mishnah says you can't do it. Now let's see. Matnitin Mani, who is the author of our Mishnah? Abba Shauli. The author of our Mishnah is Abba Shaul. The Tanya, Abba Shaul Omer, because Abba Shaul says in the Braita, Maim o yain mutar kedei letzachzecho. You are allowed to put water or wine in the shofar in order to make it clear. Meraglaim asur mipnei hakavod. But you're not allowed to put urine in there because it's disrespectful for something that you're going to be using for a mitzvah and making a bracha on to use for wine. Some people said that the disrespect is the fact that this is, some commentators I'm saying, is the fact that this is something you're going to be using for a mitzvah. Don't put urine on it. The others say no, the issue is that you're going to make a bracha, and when you're making a bracha, you have urine there. So the difference is, let's say, for example, I'm not going to make a bracha. According to one of the opinions, you would say, well, if you're not going to make a bracha on it, then maybe it would be fine. It's really the bracha that's the issue. Others say no, just the very fact that you're using urine for a mitzvah is disgusting.
So your lips are going to be shofar.
All right. You use a mask put on you. I don't know. No, yeah, that Rama is more of, that's like a personal thing that I don't like. Whereas this, what we're saying is that you're treating the mitzvah disrespectfully, and therefore it's not permitted. Let's say someone says, "No, I don't care. Someone says, I don't care. I'll wash my mouth out anyway." There are times. Okay, I don't want to give certain examples, but it could be that someone has to do something with their mouth. Again, like an example that I said. Let's say, for example, someone gets a bee sting. You're supposed to try to suck it out. Ew. Yeah, okay, but maybe some people don't care. Let's say it doesn't bother me. Still, you're not allowed to. Why? Because it's disrespectful to the mitzvah, not to you, to the mitzvah. Okay? Now let's get to the children line. This is the Igal line. You do not hold back the kids from blowing the shofar. Oh, actually, even before we get to the kids, we have to get to the ladies. So here, again, our Mishnah said children, didn't say woman. Let's say a woman wants to grab the shofar and blow it. So the implication of our Mishnah is you would tell them to stop. Because what does it say? It says if children want to do the shofar, you don't stop them. Oh, but if women did want to do the shofar, you would stop them. Now, why are we making that implication? Because we're very sensitive to this question, because there's a whole discussion about it. Are women obligated to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashana? The answer is no, women are not obligated to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashana. Why not? Time bound and positive. It's from the Torah. That's the third thing. Very good. Positive mitzvot from the Torah that are time bound. Mitzvot aseh min Torah. She'azman grama, nashim pturot. Women are exempt from it. There are exceptions. Famous exemption would be matzah on the night of Pesach. It's a positive mitzvah to eat matzah. Time bound because it's on the first night of Pesach. But they're obligated. Why? It's an exception. It's because they're not supposed to eat chametz, and they are supposed to eat matzah. Eating chametz is a negative. So since they're included in the negative of not eating chametz, they are also included in the positive of eating matzah. The same with Shabbat and Kiddush. There's different examples, but there are many mitzvot that are positive, time-bound mitzvot from the Torah that women are not obligated. For example, Sukkah. Another example, Tefillin. Women are not obligated to Tefillin. It's only mitzvah of the day, time-bound. So they're not obligated because they're not obligated to do a mitzvah that only applies during the day and not at night.
And if they do, it's a sin.
That's the topic of what we're talking about right now. The topic is, can women do it? That's exactly the question here. So here's the time-bound mitzvah of shofar. Now a woman comes and wants to blow the shofar. She's not obligated to. Do you say, hey, don't do it? That's your question, right? Should you stop her? Should you tell her, no, don't do it? Or do you say, no, it's no problem. She wants to do it, let her do it. So I didn't ask you if it was your boy who asked you or your girl who asked you. Oh, okay, fine. Oh, if it had been your girl, that would have been an extra wrinkle. into the question. Because our Mishnah here is saying if the kid wants to do it, don't stop them. And so what it's saying is, I want to learn from here. That means that, but if a lady wants to do it, you should stop her. Why? Because it's the opinion that says that women should not do mitzvot that they're not obligated in doing. Okay, let's see it. Let's see it. But there's a specific reason why here in this case, and we're going to get into big melakhot here. Do not prevent children from blowing the shofar if they want to. The implication would be, but for ladies, you would tell them, you would instruct them not to. If a woman is saying, hey, I want to do this, you would say, actually, you shouldn't. There's a braita that says, in me'akvin, we do not prevent lo et hanashim v'lo et tinokot militkoa b'yom tov, not the woman and not the children to blow the shofar on Yom Tov. So you have a Mishnah that says don't prevent the children. You have a braita that says don't prevent women and children. What does it sound like? Our Mishnah and this braita disagree. Amar Abaye, lo kasha. Abaye says it's not a problem. Ha Rabbi Yehuda, ha Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon. There's two opinions. One is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. One is the dissenting view, the other opinion of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. They are on the other team. The Tanya, we learned in a braita, it says as follows. Daber el bnei Yisrael. Speak to the bnei Yisrael. Here in the beginning of Parashat Vayikra, it says, speak to the bnei Yisrael, teaching them the laws of korbanot. And one of the laws of korbanot is what's called smicha. Does anyone know what smicha means?
Your hand on the animal's head.
Very good. It's also that, but that in this context, it's leaning on the animal. There's a mitzvah from the Torah that as you do a verbal confession, you should lean on the animal. Okay, it's called semicha or somchot, right? Somchin. It means to lean on it. Now there's a problem. What's the problem? The problem is you're not allowed to derive any personal benefit from korbanot. So you see the catch-22 here. On one hand, I'm not allowed to benefit from this thing. On the other hand, I have to put my full body weight on it and have it support me, which is a form of benefiting. So how do I do it? How do I lean on an animal if I'm not allowed to get any benefit out of it, but leaning on it is a benefit? The answer is, you're only allowed to do it because the Torah told you to. But what if the Torah didn't ask you to do it? For example, ladies, the Torah does not ask them to do somchot, and they shouldn't lean on it. This is what we're going to see here. As the Torah introduces the whole section of korbanot, it says, Daber el bnei Yisrael, v'lo benot Yisrael. It says, speak to the, this is Daber el Yisrael, or it doesn't say like, here's the law. It says, speak to the bnei Yisrael. Yeah, it could have said like that. Kol adat Yisrael, kol kahal Yisrael. It could have said one of these things, but it says, Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the bnei Yisrael, and tell them that they should do this leaning. So bnei Yisrael somchin. The boys, the men of Israel, the sons, if you will, males, will lean on it. Ve'en benot Israel samchot. But ladies should not lean on it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because they're not obligated to. And if you're not obligated to, then you shouldn't do the mitzvah. In this case, because you have this counteracting pressure of you don't want to benefit from the korban. However, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Amreim, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon say, Nashim samchot reshut. Women are allowed to if they so choose. They're not required to, but they're allowed to. So here we see. Okay, remember, this is all being posted on YouTube here, right? There are many differences throughout the years that have been made, and that's the idea of ladies is not the only thing that's been changed. But yeah, you know what? Let's see Tosfot. Because let's see what Tosfot tells us. One second, Rama, please allow me to control this part of the shiur. Okay, I promise you, I'm going to answer your questions. But you have to let me control this part of the shiur. Okay, so Daber b'nei Israel, it says that women have the option. These nashim samchot reshut. Now Rama really wants to see Tosfot, so I'm going to share the screen. Commentary. Oh, yeah, there's no Tosfot here. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Tosfot.
Robert, did they put English translation, but when you go to those commentaries on Safari, they always have the only people commentaries.
Some of them they have, some of them they don't. This one they don't. There's books for it though. Okay, so here I want to show you what Tosfot tells us. Tosfot says that that Michal bat Shaul, Michal, the daughter of Shaul HaMelech, Aita manachat tefillin. She used to wear tefillin. Ve'ishto shel Yonah, the wife of Yonah, Shaita ola laregel. She would do a positive time-bound mitzvah of doing aliyah laregel, doing aliyah Yerushalayim. She would, in fact, do these mitzvot aseh, and he builds this whole case that women are allowed to do the mitzvot, and not just that. Rabbeinu Tam takes it one step further, which is extremely important, Rama. Here, umutarot levarech al mitzvat aseh shazman grama, afal gav de piturot min davar hamitzvah. And not only are they allowed to do the mitzvah, but they're also allowed to make the bracha on it. So they are allowed to put on the tefillin and make a bracha on tefillin. They're allowed to take the lulav and say Asher Kisharim Tesunu Ani lulav. They're allowed to say Asher Kisharim Tesunu Leshev Basukah and sit in the sukkah. They're allowed to do Asher Kisharim Tesunu Leshmo Kol Shofar and to blow the shofar. They're allowed to do all of these things that even though they're not obligated to do, they're not allowed to do. They're allowed to do it even with the bracha. Why? Here's the thing: the bracha says Asher Kiddishana B'Mitzvotav. Hashem, you sanctified us in your mitzvot. Vetzivanu, and you commanded us. Laniach tefillin, to put on tefillin. Time out. Who commanded you? You're not commanded. So what the way Rabbeinu Tam would explain it is that when a woman makes the bracha, when she says Vetzivanu, you commanded us, she's speaking that you commanded us, Bnei Israel, not me, but you commanded the Jewish people. I, the lady, am making a bracha, and when I say the bracha, I say you commanded us. I'm saying you commanded the Jewish males, and I'm doing the mitzvah also. Let me show you the Rambam.
Is that a very twisted way to like, this is Rabbeinu Tam's second tefillah, Rabbeinu Tam?
Yeah, this is the same Rabbeinu Tam. He just needed more people. They're trying to sell tefillin out there, right? Okay, I'm kidding, man. Look at the Rambam in Hilchot Tzitzit. Tzitzit is a mitzvah that says Shazman Grama. Also positive time-bound mitzvah. Look what the Rambam says as he's talking about it. Nashim v'avadim uktanim p'turim min mitzvah min hatzitzit min haTorah. Women as well as others are exempt from the mitzvah of tzitzit from the Torah. V'nashim v'avadim sheratzu le'titav b'tzitzit mitzvah tefillin below bracha. Now, if a lady wants to put on tefillin, she's allowed to without a bracha. The Rambam now splits it. Rabbeinu Tam told us ladies are allowed to do the mitzvah if they want to, and they're even allowed to make a bracha. The Rambam says they could do the mitzvah if they want to, but they are not allowed to make a bracha. Below bracha. Now look at this rule. He's going to make it very clear. Sha'ar mitzvot aseh, other positive mitzvot, sha'anashim piturot mehen, that women are exempt from. Imratzu la'asot otam below bracha. If they want to do the mitzvah without a bracha, ein memachin bi'adan. You don't object to them. You let them do it. If a lady says, I want to sit in the sukkah, you let her sit in the sukkah. If the lady wants to, when I say let her, meaning I'm saying she's coming and she's asking, she's saying, I want to do it. There's no issue with it. She wants to put on tefillin, there's no issue with it. Now, unfortunately, this is something that we've asked Rabbi Ben Chaim many times about, let's say, the women that want to wear tefillin. So let's say a lady actually wants to wear tefillin. There's some discussion about making sure that you're clean. Now, men and women have the same potential issues, potentially. But let's say a woman is clean, and is more clean than a man. Okay? So is she allowed to wear tefillin? This is what Rabbi Ben Chaim tells us. The answer is, look at the Rambam. The Rambam tells you she's allowed to, without a bracha. Rabbeinu Tam would say you're allowed to make a bracha. Rambam says without a bracha. We're Sfaradim. Women would not make a bracha. However, when there is certain topics that are taken and used for different agendas, then at that point now you separate yourself from it. Why? Because then the topic comes with the discussion that men and women are completely equal. And in the law, in the eye of the halakha, men and women are not equal. It's not a matter of which one is better or worse. It's not a discussion of that. It's that men are obligated to certain mitzvot and women are not. If a woman wants to wear tefillin because she wants to do the mitzvah, because that's what her heart desires and she wants to do it, she's allowed to. She's not required to. She's allowed to. The Rambam says you don't stop her. But if a woman is doing that because she is making the statement that according to halacha, men and women should be completely equal, that's not what the halacha is. This is not a matter of who's better or worse. It's not a matter of men are higher than women, chas v'shalom, or women are higher than men. It's not about that. It's a matter of there's differences. And if you're trying to make a statement by saying we're exactly the same, well, that's not true according to halacha. There's differences in halacha. Women are not obligated in positive time-bound mitzvot, and men are. If you're saying that a woman has to wear tefillin and she should wear tefillin because she's the same as man and she should have the same requirement, that's against halacha. So this is what Rabbeinu Tam always tells us. If a woman wants to wear tefillin, she has a heart, she wants to do a mitzvah, heart connected to Hashem, you wouldn't stop her. She wants to shake the lulav etrog, you wouldn't stop her. She wants to sit in the sukkah, even though she's not required to, you wouldn't stop her. But if she's saying, I want to do it because I'm not any different than any man, then look, you want to talk about different rights movements, that's fine. But in the world of halacha, there's a difference between men and women. It's as simple as that. So that's why some of these issues, like you said, of tefillin, it might be that there's other factors at hand. If a woman wants to wear tefillin, she's allowed to. You see it in the Rambam right here. She's allowed to without a bracha. And Ashkenazim, Rabbeinu Tam would take it a step further and says, you're even allowed to, a woman is allowed to make a bracha, which is wild.
They shouldn't be shunned if they put it on. Sometimes you see at the kotel.
Okay, Rama, again, I asked you to please let me control this part of the shiur. I think I did a very good job by giving you everything you wanted and more. I think so. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going back to the Gemara. Okay. Now we're getting into the topic of the kids blowing the shofar. Okay. Aval mit'asekin bahem ad sheyilmedu. But now what we say is you're allowed to get involved with the kids until they learn how to blow the shofar. So 2 lines of a Mishnah. The first line of the Mishnah, when I say 2 lines, I mean of this whole children's section. What's the first line? It says ein me'akvin. What does ein me'akvin mean? You don't restrain them, right? You don't hold them back. The kid wants to do it. You don't tell him, hey, put that down. It's Shabbat. You don't do that. You don't hold them back. And the rest of the line says, you involve yourself. You involve yourself and occupy yourself for them to learn. Okay? What's the difference of implication between those 2 lines? One is passive or more b'diavad. If the kid is doing it, you don't stop them, but don't tell him to do it. Don't encourage him. And the second line sounds like you encourage him. You get him involved to do it from the very beginning. So which one is it? Okay, let's go ahead and see what the Gemara is going to tell us. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar tells us, afilu b'Shabbat. First thing is that even on Shabbat, this is why I call this the Igal Gemara. Even on Shabbat, a child comes to you and asks you to get to blow the shofar. You do not hold them back, even though it's Shabbat. Tani nami achi, we learned in a Braita. You teach the kids, you train the kids until they learn. Afilu b'Shabbat, even on Shabbat. You do not prevent the kids from blowing the shofar on Shabbat. All the more so, even if it's not Shabbat and it's just Yom Tov. The Gemara says, Ha gufa kasha. So the first thing here that we're saying is that even on Shabbat, which is exactly Igal's case, you have Shabbat, Rosh Hashana, your child comes and asks you to blow the shofar. What we're saying here is that you get yourself, you don't stop them, and you could teach them, tell them what to do. The question is, should you pick it up yourself and do it? And the answer is, machloket. It sounds like there are some opinions that say, like the quote Rashi that says, that you yourself should not do it yourself. Don't bring the sound out yourself, but tell them what to do. Show them where to put their hand. Show them where to do this. Tell them, okay, do a long one, now do a short one, now do a shivarim. All of that you're allowed to do, but don't do it yourself. Whereas the other opinion says, no, do it yourself. You have to train them. You have to teach them. You have to do it in order to teach them. Okay, so there's 2 opinions. I think Igal holds like the second opinion. Igal, and he has what to rely on. You have what to rely on. And I'm going to show you what the Rambam says after we do this. Actually, we could look at the Rambam quickly now. Look at the Rambam. This is in chapter 2, line 7. Children, I mean, I'm really jumping ahead, but children that didn't reach the age of chinuch, you do not hold them back from blowing the shofar on Shabbat, if it's not Rosh Hashana. Meaning, Shabbat, that's not Rosh Hashana. Exactly, in his case, in order for them to learn, umutar legadol, and it's permitted for an adult, sheit asek imahen, to be involved with them, Kidei lelamedan b'yom tov, in order to teach them on Yom Tov. It's permitted for an adult to be involved with them. Can I do it? Can the adult do it himself? It's not so clear. Still not clear. So look at this little button 4 here. It's going to quote a Magid Mishnah. He may tell them to blow the shofar and teach them how to blow. This is what the Magid Mishnah is basically saying. He may teach them what to do, tell them to do it, but don't do it yourself. This is what the Magid Mishnah and others would say. Others would come to say that maybe it's allowed. Again, it's probably better not to. So yeah, I think next time the situation happens, you could just tell him this is how you do it. And we enter a whole then again the Rama's question. Okay. As long as she doesn't say bracha. Right. That's what I think. Okay, now this is from the implications. Haguva kasha. Your whole statement is inconsistent. By the way, I just don't want to skip it. Elliot, you were asking a question. You were saying Rabbeinu Tam's reading of it is not fair. Like the Torah, the bracha says, Hashem, you made us holy and you commanded us to do the mitzvah of love. The woman is not obligated in that, so why is she saying it? So that's what the Rambam says. Rabbeinu Tam seems to say that he gives a couple examples. He gives if you just want to see how big this Tosfot is, okay, if you're looking at the art scroll for a second, I just want you to see how big the Tosfot is. The Tosfot, the ladies, starts on the top that says Ha Rabbi Yehuda and wraps around the entire thing, goes all the way down here. So the entire page of this Tosfot. It's a Tosfot that comes up a lot. It's a very, very, very hot topic. It's something that's like very famous because it comes up all the time. Sfirat Omer. Sfirat Omer is another example. We saw the says Shazman Grama. So Sephardi women do not make a bracha. Ashkenazi women, they can, and I've seen it. They do it. Many Ashkenazi women make the bracha. Who commanded you? No. So Rabbeinu Tam says no one commanded the ladies, but they commanded Am Yisrael. So yeah, your issue that you have with it is the same issue that the Rambam has with it. The Rambam says, "What are you talking about?" But that's how Rabbeinu Tam. That's the way Rabbeinu Tam holds. Okay. So a little bit earlier. Yeah, Rabbeinu Tam is a little bit earlier than the Rambam. Tosfot is a group of commentators. Rabbeinu Tam is one of them, but there are a few of them. It's like a team and a group of commentators, basically. Tosfot is not a single person. Rashi is a single person. Tosfot, really, Tosafot means the additions. Tosafot is Lohosif, means to add. It really means the additions, the emendations. And it's a group of commentators that are part of Tosfot. Rabbeinu Tam was a grandson of Rashi. Rashbam was also a grandson of Rashi. So yeah, it's a little bit after Rashi's time period, and the Rambam's a little bit after that. Okay? Good. Now let's get back to the question about the children. On one hand, you say, don't stop them. On the other hand, you say, help them. So which one is it? Hagufa kasha. Amart. You said you should occupy yourself, meaning help them until they learn. Even if it's Shabbat. That sounds like lechatchila means initially you would say blow the shofar. You take your kid, okay, it's Shabbat afternoon, blow the shofar. But then the first part of the Mishnah, what did you say? Ein me'akvin, don't prevent them. So ikuvahu de lo me'akvin, we don't prevent them, but you don't encourage them. You don't encourage them to blow the shofar. So which one is it? Do you say don't encourage them, but if they do it, it's fine, close a blind eye to it? Or do you say that you should encourage them to do it from the beginning? Lo kashya, it's not a problem. Kan. And now I'm turning the page to Lamed Gimel Lamed Bet. Bekatan shehigia lechinuch, kan bekatan shelo higia chinuch. It depends. There's different ages. There could be a child that reached the age of education, and another of training, and another child that did not reach the age of training. What does that mean? It's a big machloket as to what this means. But the question is, there's a certain point where a kid actually starts to get it. There's a certain point, like if my son right now, he just turned 4. I think if I give him a shofar now, no matter how hard he tries, he's not going to be able to blow a shofar in a professional way. It's just a matter of like how big, his lungs are. It's just something that he can't necessarily do, right? But maybe I don't know, a 9-year-old can, right? 10-year-old can do it. So when you talk about kids, there's like a 12-year-old kid that could do a shofar better than some adults. But then there's like a 3-year-old kid that it's a toy, if anything, like it's a hammer. Even if they put their mouth on it, they're not blowing the shofar in the proper way. So here's what we're saying. It's a level of competency. Exactly. Competency in that they could do it, and also on this level of intelligence, like whether they understand what they're doing. So, but the competency is exactly it. Very good. Katan she'higia lechinuch is a halachic term that reached the age of training, or a child that has not yet reached the age where you could train them in something.
It's different, or is there?
Melakhot. So Yigal wants to know, when I say that a child that reached the age of training or not, how is that defined? Is that an age? Is that an age of 9? Is that an age of 6? Is it an age of 12? Does it depend on the child? Does it depend on the mitzvah? Certain mitzvah of tzitzit is very simple for a 4-year-old to understand. You put this on. It's very simple. Of kashrut also. Some kids, you tell a kid, maybe they don't understand this is not kosher, but it has a picture of Paw Patrol on it. What do you mean? I want to eat it, right? Like that could be something. You try to explain certain things to kids, maybe they don't get it, right? But on the other hand, let's say a mitzvah of tefillin. A kid can't do this. So there's like a 12-year-old could put on tefillin, but a 5-year-old can't. But again, maybe shaking the lulav, he can. So do you go by mitzvah? That was really Yigal's question. So the answer is basically all of the above. There are some opinions that draw lines and say the age 12 for sure, no matter what, the age 12 is considered that. Some say age 9, some say age 6, some say it depends on the child, some say it depends on the mitzvah. It's really all different things, and this is a lot of it where it's discussed. We don't need to get too much into it, except for it to explain as follows. If there's 2 types of situations. One time you're going to encourage the kid, blow the shofar, do it, even though it's Shabbat, like Yigal's case, even though it's Shabbat, tell him to do it. And there's another situation like, don't tell him to do it, but if he's doing it, you don't have to tell him to stop. So one of these is going to be when a child reaches the age of chinuch. Another one is when the child has not yet reached the age of chinuch. Now, which one is which? Machloket Rashi Tosfot. Okay, so it's basically machloket all around. Let me first explain to you what Rashi says. Rashi says, you don't go encourage a 2-year-old to start blowing the shofar on Shabbat of Rosh Hashana. If he hasn't reached the age of chinuch, you don't encourage him. That's a situation where if he does it, you don't tell him to stop. If he picks it up, you don't tell him to stop. But you don't encourage him to do it. But once he reaches the age of competency of 9, 10 years old, now you start encouraging him. Hey, you could do it. Practice. You could do it in Kanisa with me in a few more weeks. Go do it. So that's what according to Rashi, that the younger age is a situation where you don't encourage him. You just don't prevent him from doing it if he decides. Whereas the older age minor, you would encourage him to do it. Tosfot says the opposite. Tosfot says on Shabbat, an adult is not supposed to do it, right? The adult is not supposed to do it. We don't do it on Shabbat. So once the child starts getting smarter, starts getting older, starts reaching the age of 11, 12, now you start weaning him off. Don't start telling him to blow the shofar. He's the one that you stop telling him to do it. Instead, if he does it, okay, fine, he's still a child, but don't tell him to do it. But to the 2-year-old, you could say like, hey, the kid is picking up a toy truck, and say, well, we'll play with the truck, try to blow your shofar, and he goes around the house, and then you regret your decision. But that you're allowed to encourage him to do. Why? Because he's a kid. There's no issue with him to do anything. So this is the difference between Rashi and Tosfot, the exact opposite on this whole thing. And then there's a whole discussion of where you draw that line. But you understand conceptually how there's different kids. Some of them, you would tell them to do it. Some of them, you don't tell them to do it, but if they do it, you wouldn't stop them. Okay? So in conclusion, Yigal's case is exactly discussed in our Mishnah. It's exactly discussed. And the only thing I would do differently is I wouldn't handle it myself, but instead you could tell the kids to do it. But even that, there's opinions that would allow you to do it. The next part of the Mishnah, I just want to explain, just to give a preview. The last part of the Mishnah, actually, you have a few more minutes? I know you guys closed the books. Can we go a few more minutes? Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, so is there a third option though for the case of the kid where
it's saying, it says don't encourage, but also encourage, like, couldn't it mean that don't encourage them, but if they start, you can encourage them after that? Like, if you see them pick it up, you can encourage them. Right, so why would you? Okay, so what we're saying now is that there's two types of children. On one child, encourage them to do it. The other one, don't encourage, but you don't need to stop him. Okay, so now what you're saying is, don't encourage him until he starts and then start encouraging him. Why? Why would I go from not encouraging him at all, and then the second he picks it up, now flipping, do a 180 and start telling him, do it. Because at that age, don't get involved, is basically what we're saying. Don't tell him to do it, and if he doesn't, leave him alone. Just don't get involved. Whereas the older age, according to Rashi, from the very beginning, you encourage him to do it. Yeah, very good. I actually want to, it's 9:39. I want to finish this last section because we already did it, so we could fly through it. Okay, when we talk about, this was something that Igal mentioned as we were doing this Gemara. There's 3 levels when it comes to intention of blowing the shofar, okay? One level is, I am aware that I'm blowing the shofar, and I am aware that I'm doing a mitzvah. There's 2 things I have in mind here. Number 1, I have in mind that I am fully aware of what I am doing of blowing a shofar in the proper way. And number 2, I am fully aware that I am currently fulfilling a mitzvah. That's one thing, on one end. Then let's take it one step down, where I'm aware that I'm blowing the shofar, but I'm not aware that I'm doing a mitzvah. For example, I'm showing him how to do it. So as I'm showing him how to do it, I'm fully aware that I'm blowing the shofar, and I'm aware that I'm doing it properly, but I don't have in mind to do the mitzvah, because I'm not doing the mitzvah. I'm just showing you how to do it. That's one level down, right? The lowest level down is, I'm definitely not aware of doing a mitzvah, but I'm not even aware that I'm doing the shofar properly. I'm just taking it, and it happens to be it's doing it correct. Meaning that case, the lowest case, where I am doing it absent-mindedly. You get the points. One is, I'm consciously trying to do a mitzvah, and the other thing is that I'm consciously doing this exercise of blowing the shofar. You have both of them, that's doing the mitzvah and doing the shofar. And I'm doing the shofar for a mitzvah. It's possible that I'm doing shofar, but not for mitzvah. For example, you're blowing shofar to show someone else how to do it. I'm doing the shofar consciously, but I'm not doing it for a mitzvah. And then the third case is, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just like, right? I'm not consciously blowing a shofar. I'm not even doing it the right way. That's called mit'asek. So our Mishnah says, if you're mit'asek, in this third case, you do not fulfill your obligation. Mit'asek lo yatsa. If you're doing a mit'asek, you do not fulfill your obligation. Hatokea lashir yatsa. Oh, that would mean in the middle case. Let's say I'm blowing the shofar consciously, but I'm not doing it for the mitzvah. I'm doing it for a song. I'm doing it because I like the tune. I'm doing it because it helps me as I'm exercising. It helps get my blood flowing. I don't know. Let's say that's the case. You would think that you fulfill your obligation in that case, because it's telling you if you're mit'asek, which is the third case, you didn't fulfill your obligation. Oh, but in your middle case, where I'm aware of what I'm doing, I'm just don't have in mind to do a mitzvah, I'm doing it just for a song, you would think that you fulfilled your obligation. Lema Messiah Leila Rava, so that should be a proof, according to Rava, the Amar Rava, as Rava told us, Atokea Lashir Yatza. Rava said, if you blow the shofar for song, you fulfilled your obligation. You're conscious in that you're blowing the shofar, but you don't have in mind to do this for the mitzvah. So the Gemara says, no, don't conclude that our Mishnah holds like Rava. Why? Dilma Tokea Lashir Nami Mit'asik Karele. It's possible that the author of our Mishnah lumps this middle category of someone who's blowing the shofar without having in mind to do the mitzvah. He lumps that in together with the first group of don't even know what you're doing. Why? Because if you don't have in mind to blow the shofar, to do a mitzvah, I call that mit'asek. So we try to use this as a proof that you don't need kavanah to do a mitzvah. And we said don't use our Mishnah as a proof because mit'asek could mean 2 possible things. And now we're going to do it one more line. Also, someone who listens to someone who is blowing the shofar in mit'asek, in this third case, didn't fulfill his obligation. Oh, what does that sound like? It sounds like it sounds like if I heard someone who's blowing the shofar and is doing it the right way, but he didn't have me in mind, he only had himself in mind, it sounds like I fulfilled my obligation. Why? Because it says, if you heard that guy who had no idea what he's doing, then he didn't fulfill the obligation. Oh, that means if I heard the guy who knew what he was doing, I did fulfill the obligation? But doesn't he have to have me specifically in mind? That goes against the opinion of Rabbi Zera. The Amar le Rabbi Zera, the Shamek is Rabbi Zera, told his attendant, told his shamash, told his gabbai, you need to have me in mind. When you're blowing the shofar, you need to have me specifically in mind. The implication of our Mishnah is you don't need that. Because all the Mishnah says is if the guy doesn't know what he's doing, then he didn't, and you heard him blow, you didn't fulfill the obligation. It sounds like then if he knows what he's doing, I did fulfill my obligation. But Rabbi Zera requires him to know what he's doing and have me in mind. So it sounds like our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Zera. So the Gemara says the same type of answer. Dilma, I did Tana Resha Mit'asek, Tani Seifa Nami Mit'asek. Maybe not. Maybe the Mishnah in the first case used the word Mit'asek. So in the second case, it also used Mit'asek, just because it would just wanted to use the same word, but it's not precise. Maybe Rabbi Zera's requirement that you need to hear from someone who hasn't you specifically in mind is the case. Oh, the Mishnah just said, just make sure you don't hear from a guy who has no idea what he's doing. Yeah, it could have also said, make sure you don't hear from a guy who knows what he's doing but doesn't have you in mind. But the Mishnah just wanted, once the Mishnah used the word Mit'asek once, it wanted to use the word Mit'asek another reason for parallelism. Okay, we'll stop there because we already spoke about this at length. The next shiur, guess what we're talking about? How many blasts of shofar you need to have? How many tikiyot? How many teruot? What is a teruah? What is a shivarim? How long each one has to be? It's time. It's time to hopefully ask someone to come join in and give us a demonstration. Bezrat Hashem, I have to work on finding someone to come do a demonstration for us. Okay, Azak Baruch. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good night, everyone.